Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to wait a few minutes while everybody comes on into the Zoom room. Thanks for joining us tonight. The chat's open too if you want to say hello. We love a lively chat. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for coming, everyone. Just wait a few. Look at your Shawn. Look at your merch. That's awesome. Acting all casual over there in his. I love it. Love it. Welcome, welcome. We're just waiting another few seconds for anyone else to join. Sometimes Zoom gets really slow with the lag. I don't want anyone to miss a word of your conversation.
Totally fair.
Totally fair. It would be cruel. Thank you for coming, everybody. My name is Casey Robinson. I'm the events manager at the Silver Unicorn Bookstore in West Acton, Massachusetts. So glad to have you here tonight. We are in for a fun night of conversation about two fantastic books. First of all, look at this cover. Kelsey Murphy and the Academy of Unbreakable Arts. I mean, come on, look at that. By Erika Lewis. And in conversation with Erika is Shawn Peters, the author of The Unforgettable Logan Foster, and he truly is unforgettable. We are so excited to have you both here tonight. Thank you so much. These are a special treat, these two books, because they're the first books in series, new series, middle grade series. So I'm going to save my most burning question, which is when will we see book 2 until the end of your conversation, but I do need to know. And hopefully it's very soon because I can't take it. But thank you both for being here, and you two are going to take over and I'm going to fade magically off into the background, but we will have plenty of time for questions. If anybody wants to ask Erika or Shawn a question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A or in the chat. Any comments you like in the chat as well, and I will come back in a bit to ask you some great questions. But thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you. Hi, Shawn.
Hi, Erika. I love your background. That looks like the shelf.
Over here, yeah. I'm setting it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. I have to figure mine out because I just have a white door behind me. But
the bookshelf right behind you, right there.
That's next. So I'm so excited to talk. In full disclosure, you knew you were going to be doing this event and you invited me because we have plenty to talk about between our books.
Yeah.
But, we both write about heroes. And so I thought maybe we would start out with our origin stories, right? Like for anybody that's actually watching, what is your origin story? How did you end up writing about heroes, writing about Kelsey Murphy and being on this today?
Well, I think superheroes for me were everything growing up. So from my origin story perspective, I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. My parents were divorced, and it was a very active, busy time, and everybody was always gone. And I literally, I think, turned to my imaginary world as a bit of an escape from some of all that chaos. And I felt really grateful to have, mostly they were my brother's comics. I would just steal them from out from under the bed, because until I was a certain age, it was like, and could, voice my own opinion. It was, especially in those days, it wasn't very girly, and I was not girly. I was a tomboy, so to speak. So Fantastic Four, Johnny Torch was my thing. I loved it. And I then, I read a lot of the ones that they've now turned into TV shows like Archie and Sabrina, and had TV shows that I would watch like when I was really little, the original Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars when it came out, you know, forcing my parents to take me 8 times to see it in the theater, and which was a really bad thing back then, because unlike now where you can not just book your time but book your seat, back then you had to stand in line outside and buy a ticket first, and if you didn't get in, they didn't count how many people were there. I mean, it wasn't that, you know, they weren't like, it was okay, let everybody in, when it's full, stop, you wait 2 hours in line for the next showing. I mean, that's just the way it was. But so they were pretty good about that. And then as I got older, I started, you know, I had a lot of trouble learning how to read. So comics were like my lifeline. I have it's kind of a form of dyslexia where I would see the inside of a sentence and not the outside. So I would have to reread things like 30 or 40 times.
Wow.
And I didn't discover this until much later in life, and I was really kind of embarrassed about it. And like, you know, I always tell kids when I'm talking to them, make sure you say something, you know. But when I got to high school, and an English teacher I had helped me out, and he realized what was happening, and he talked to me a lot about reading and rereading and rereading, and that was the only way to get my eyes strong enough to be able to refocus on things. And it was funny. So by then I was started to get into some of the stuff that all of my middle school friends were reading, you know, like Tolkien, and, you know, some of the books that I feel like I had been missing out. And then when I got to college and beyond, I wanted to work in television, and I wanted to work on things in scripted television. And so I was fortunate enough in my early years to get to work with Marvel and work with not as much on the DC side of things. I did a Marvel TV show called Mutant X, and I got to work with some Star Trek stuff on Andromeda, and shows like the first La Femme Nikita after the movie. I think it's been remade at least once or twice since then. So that was really fun. And then I started, it was actually, I had this great project partner, and his name was Stan Lee. I actually was working with Stan on a project.
Name dropping.
Name dropping, and it was an idea of mine, something I really wanted to do, and I, for the first time ever, had you know, I was going to pitch my idea, and he was like, you know, you should really write these. You can do this, like, you know, someone who has that kind of, you know. He and another person named Michael Uslan, both of them were really just so influential to me, and really Michael sat down one day and just sort of taught me how to write comics. And so that was the first thing I did, was starting to write comics. And I always felt like, not just me, but especially young adults, you need superheroes, because they give you, they show you a kind of courage, you know. They're always reluctant. They're always, you know, afraid of what it is that they have to tackle, which is exactly the way life is, right? And so they have this courage of conviction about something, inciting incident wise, just gets them off their derriere. And they're like, all right, I've got to do this. I mean, Spider-Verse, you know, Miles Morales, let's, you know, his whole world starts falling apart. He's afraid of his new powers. And then his uncle is killed, and his father comes knocking on his door, and he realizes everything he loves else is in danger. And that's, you know, you got to get off your duff and do something. And that's the greatest thing about superheroes, is they make you feel like you can do something. They give you courage, you know?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So that's why I write about superheroes.
I gotcha.
Yeah. How about you?
So my superhero origin story is a little bit more like the Peter Parker version, which is like, he wasn't trying to become a superhero when he got bit by the spider, right? Like, I am the son of 2 writers. My father was a sports writer. My mother was a TV writer out in Hollywood. Like, I moved out there when I was 6 from Massachusetts, and she wrote on Facts of Life, and she wrote on A Different World and Love Boat and One Day at a Time. And so I, of course, grew up in a house where writing was like, of course you're going to write. So it couldn't have been cool. right? Like I'm like,
Yeah.
right, who wants to be a writer? Who wants to be what their parents are, right? So I want to
Right.
be an actor. And what I always say
Yeah.
is that if I'd been a better actor, I never would have gotten a chance to be a writer. So because I auditioned, I was a kid, you know, I had an agent, I was auditioning, I almost landed a movie called that ended up becoming Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I
Oh
literally got
yeah.
cast in it and they switched directors and then I was out.
Oh
And who knows, you know, like you want to talk about Spider-Verse, right? Like, or about
yeah.
the madness, right? Multiverse. In some universe, I got that and I'm living a completely different life. But I was always a comic book kid, not the kind that had like the plastic sleeves. I was
Yeah.
the plow through them, read them, catalog their powers. Who do I think
Yeah.
would win? That was my vibe because I had a lot of allergies. I had huge tonsils, and I would like I just would miss like a day of school a month just because the wind changed, right? And my parents would go to
Oh
the store, buy a stack of
yeah.
comics because back then you didn't have a TV in every room. So like,
Yeah.
you know, if you were homesick, you needed to do something to
Yeah.
stay calm, drink your fluids, and read your comic books. So so my attachment to comic books definitely also had that extra thing of like they were my comfort read. Like when I was feeling sick, I would read them and you know like they would rescue me from whatever I was feeling. So like I loved DC, I loved Marvel. I think I leaned a little more Marvel. I loved Thor. Thor was one of my early ones
Yeah.
because I was also a D&D nerd and
Okay.
so like to have like a superhero that was also a god and I could study him in the deities and demigods book of you know the first edition of that, so that was all fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's where I kind of got my thing for that. And then sometime in my 20s when I went back to LA, I decided I didn't want to be a waiter. I wasn't a good enough waiter or a good enough actor to do either of those for a living. I started trying to write for television and movies. I
Yeah.
got to write really unglamorous television is what I would call it, like police chase series about, you know, like reality videos and stuff like that. I got to do makeover shows. And then I started getting into different types of writing articles about my relationship. I wrote about fantasy sports for ESPN. And then eventually, once I had kids, middle grade age, and I went back and started reading the books from my childhood and the
Right.
newer ones, you know, whether it's the Rowlings and the Riordans, I just said, these are the kinds of stories I want to tell. And
Yeah.
it was right at during the time of the Marvel boom. So like, I realized that nobody was writing big superhero stories for that age. And
Yeah.
it all kind of came together pretty quick.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
All right. So I think you've already kind of touched on this, but I know that we wanted to talk about like, why do we think heroes and superheroes are important for readers like right now? Like you talked about just that being able to see these people that were reluctant and didn't ask for this power, but then
Yeah.
realized that once you have with great power comes great
Yeah.
responsibility,
Because
right?
great.
But like,
Yeah.
but why now? Like, why now? Because they are having like a moment that has been going on for a
I
while.
think, that we're living, it's easy for us as adults to say we're living in a really hard time. I mean, the pandemic hit us all hard, getting locked in, the crazy politics in the world that we're living in right now. But it's from there, it's even 10 times harder, I think, at least in my mind, for elementary and middle school age kids and high school age kids. But especially for the younger ones, in the sense that they're not getting the chance to be around their friends,
Mm,
and they're not getting a chance to do a lot to feel safe in their world. And I think the one thing that fantasy novels give everyone is a chance to take a break, a
mhm,
chance to get away from the world that exists and go into a world that, it doesn't necessarily feel safe, but it's fantastically not safe.
mhm,
And you always feel like at the end of the day, you can make a difference. It's gonna come out okay. And to be able to escape to another place, and have those heroes come in and save the day. That for me and for I think for kids today, it's really important. I mean, we all try to tackle really big issues in stories. We all try to, Fahrenheit 451 is a great example of a fantastical thing talking about banning books, right? These are all things that are really important. And we all want to tackle yeah, right. It's really relevant right now, right? It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. That should come up again. But on top of that, it add another layer of that. I think people need it right now.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason why we're all, waiting for the next Marvel TV show to drop or next fantasy novel to come out.
Yeah.
We're all looking for that way of feeling really good, like something good, like somebody can fix the problems.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think so. I think that's really true. I think that superheroes have gotten more interesting and nuanced since like when we were kids, like I think we grew up kind of in the Hulk smash, Superman can be perfect and never conflicted about anything and yet never kill anyone kind of era. And like, I do think that they've gotten more nuanced and they're dealing with stuff. And I think that that's something good for kids to see right now, is that like even these outrageously powerful people that are going to save the day and stuff like that, like might actually struggle and see that everything's not black and white. And I know that in the Unforgettable Logan Foster, I tackle that pretty head on, because I kind of take the idea of a villain out of the, a villain is somebody that just does bad things, or like who wants to do bad things. And I try to embrace this idea that like everyone's the hero of their own story. So you have to kind of understand what story they're telling themselves to understand how they're the hero. But like, I also think that like I've shifted, like when I was a kid, like you just tell me who a hero is and I knew who a hero is. And I think that now we see most heroes, not anti-heroes, but heroes are people in these things that are willing to do something hard that might not be the best for them, but they know that it will do more good for more people. And like, and I think that's something kids need to see right now, because we are so partisan right now, and everybody kind of has this us and them mentality. And to see characters who are willing to put their own self-interest on the line and say, this isn't what's best for me, whether I think it's powerful for kids. And it's one of the things I think that hopefully will lead them out of kind of the dark corner we're in right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've made a pretty big mess, and they're going to be the ones to come in and save us in some regards. And I think that, from a story perspective, like with Kelsey, she was she's what I would consider very much a reluctant hero, but a little bit of a self-centered hero, a little bit too, because she's a 12-year-old kid who's been abandoned and has no memory of her parents. She was 5 when she was abandoned, and she thinks that, she just can't remember them, and they're going to come back. And after she has this moment where she's attacked and unleashes this great evil, she's got to decide whether she's going after it or not. And when she does, all the way through the story, it's the same question over and over again. Is she there just to figure out who her parents are because she suddenly has a clue? Or is she actually going to allow herself to make friends for the first time and allow herself to trust, because she's a kid who's been moved from foster group home, not a nice place on purpose. Of course, this is all, manipulated, but she's been moved from one miserable place to another. And for her, as a character, she's just never been able to hang on to a friend. And then when she gets there, it's this first time where she feels like, should I let my guard down? I don't know how to even be a friend. She doesn't know how to be a friend with anyone. And I know from my own growing up how important it was, and how those bonds just helped me so much. And so for her, it's a question of her literally saying, what's more important to me? Is it is it me and all these things, or am I truly a hero? Can I actually be what everybody wants or needs me to be, and still manage to hang on to these friends that have suddenly become important to her?
Yeah.
Because then eventually they become, like, I don't want to lose them. I finally got a home. I finally got friends and a family.
And without spoilers, I will
Yeah,
say
I'm
that,
trying
like,
not to spoil.
it turns out she couldn't do one without the other, right?
That's very true.
Right. No spoilers.
No
But there you go.
spoilers. That's
Well,
very
and
true.
so, like, and obviously, like, you and I we didn't know each other when we were writing these books, but like,
No.
Logan, obviously there's so many little like overlap. The Venn diagram
Yeah.
is more this than this, right? And yeah, because Logan also is a kid, he's an orphan, he's been in placements. I think the difference between our things is that no one's asking him to be a hero, and he has whatever his powers are, they've been devalued. Like, Kelsey discovers her powers a bit in this, and Logan's powers have actually they've made him feel more othered, and because they haven't like, people don't value them, and they feel that his eidetic memory, which, I mean, is something that people on this planet have, but his version of it is a superpower version of it. But they've just it's annoying. It's what gets adults get embarrassed by when he corrects them, or teachers do, and other kids, as somebody that grew up as the really small smart kid in the class, I know that isn't a winning combination at that age, really. That, like, no one's like, I hope I get to be friends with the shortest kid in class who remembers stuff real well.
Who knows everything?
Maybe for group projects, right?
I was gonna say, my kids would have totally befriended that guy, the kid because he has all the answers.
Right, exactly. But so
he knows, that's him.
But Logan too has to learn what it means to have friends and family that actually care about him, and it's when he discovers people that actually see him the way he is, and don't expect him to learn the way other people learn or act the way other people, but instead are genuinely interested in his perspective and it opens the door. And then, just like Kelsey, right? Like, if you're somebody that has convinced yourself that you can get by without those people in your life, you fooled yourself into believing that. Things get a lot more complicated once you actually have people that you care about and who count on you, and who aren't just going to leave the first time things get rough.
Yeah. I mean, in a weird way, it's almost like the first time you have kids of your own. Do you know what I mean? It's like that whole idea that, your son, this person is dependent on you, you know what I mean? And vice versa. It becomes the alter, you know what I mean? We go back and forth with these relationships. But if you're someone who was born without having a lot of family and a lot of, it's a funny thing in the story, because I'm actually writing, editing, I should say, because I really need to get this finished. I wrote book 2. I wrote book 2. I'm editing book 2 now. But as I'm doing it, we get more and more involved in the backstory of not that there's not a lot in book 1 with all the kids in the story, but very much with her group, her Fiona, her SEAL Team 6 that's put together, or SEAL Team 4 in this case. Each of them come from a fairly different version of a dysfunctional family, except ironically for Zephyr, who is sort of a bit of the class clown kind of character, who ends up being in charge of them. And because of that, he's got to sort of make everybody see him like he's not funny, and like, no, I'm in charge, you have to listen to me, kind of thing. But by the time we see him later on, we realize that his family has given him such a strong sense of trusting himself, like, even though they're not all that, it's huge, and his brothers have beaten him up all his life and all those kinds of things. There's an interesting confidence, a self-confidence that comes from having family having your back, and Kelsey doesn't have that, and neither does Logan, and so that's sort of,
I just realized that we got so into the superheroes, which led to kind of like our heroes, that like we never really gave the elevator pitch of like what our two books are. And I'm imagining, I can't see the chat, but like there might be some people out there that are like, this is all really interesting. What's your book about?
What are they talking about?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
I can go first real quick. Okay, here's my book, which is so exciting to be able to touch. Kelsey Murphy and the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts, if I could speak English right now, is about a 12-year-old girl who is abandoned in Boston Harbor, literally in the middle of winter, and rescued by the sailors on the USS Constitution, Revolutionary warship that is still there. And from that point on, her life is pretty miserable. She has moved from one foster group home to another. And when we meet her, she's on a field trip to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, which is a really cool museum if you've never been. And there she's attacked by some very evil fairies who make her unleash the greatest evil the other world has ever known. And when she does that, she's left behind and is given a choice. They happen to mention knowing who her parents were, and she wants to find them. So she follows them, and she ends up at a school, which was very unexpected. And it just happens to be the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts, which is a military magic school, led by the legendary Irish mythological teaching goddess, Skyhawk, who is she taught all the biggest heroes in Ireland martial arts and magical weapons and how to fight. She was very selective in who she taught, just like she's still very selective in who she teaches. And it's testing day. So Kelsey has to decide whether she's going to test. And this is a journey of her finding out, trying to figure out who she is and what her background is. And when she does, not necessarily a positive thing, she, has to figure out whether she can, muddle through the rest of this existence in the other world and at the academy. All the while being attacked and trying to.
She gets attacked a lot.
It's attacked a lot.
That is like, you do her dirty a little bit. She gets attacked a lot.
Well, I mean, it's all part of the testing.
Yeah,
without spoilers.
Right.
Without spoilers.
All right. So my book, The Unforgettable Logan Foster, is all about Logan Foster. We both put the names in so we could never forget, like the names of the characters in the book. So Logan Foster is a 12-year-old neurodivergent orphan with an eidetic memory, no filter, and he has no illusions about being ever adopted or even fostered again. He's been fostered 6 times. It's never worked. He's living in an orphanage in El Segundo, California. But he is sure that at some point he will grow up and get to search out a younger sibling that he believes he has, because when he was 3 years old and discovered in Los Angeles International Airport alone and abandoned, he was wearing a shirt that said "World's Best Big Brother." And so he has hung all of his belief that there is somebody out there that didn't abandon him but would want to know him on this idea. And LA is going through some very strange earthquakes. And a nice couple decides they want to possibly foster him. And in the middle of their kind of get together, there's a terrible earthquake that he assumes kills them both. He survives only using like some very specific knowledge that he happened to have retained from reading a local newspaper to get away from the lava, zip line across it. And when he gets back to the orphanage, Gil and Margie, this seemingly nice couple, come for him. They're not dead. They still want him. And so he says yes. And immediately he can tell that something is amiss with them. They're nice, but they're hiding something. All the food in the house is brand new. The mom, Margie, is the worst cook ever. It's like she can't make anything that even tastes like food. Gil, who's a huge punster, never eats. And they have like, their garage has like a military grade lock on it, and all these things. And Logan has decided, and even though he befriends the girl next door, Elena, who is older and athletic and very cool, he's ready to go back to the orphanage because he can't live with people that aren't telling him the truth. That is until they are attacked in the middle of a movie theater by a supervillain. And it turns out his parents are superheroes, and superheroes are real. And every comic book and movie and TV show you've ever seen is just a cover story to keep people from knowing that there are superheroes on this planet. They just can't be everywhere.
Yeah. Well done.
All right. So now,
All right.
however many people have been watching now know what we're talking about in retrospect. Now we have to say it all again. No, I don't. What do you think? Is this a good time to open up to any questions from Casey or the people? All right.
Yeah. Hi, Casey.
Penny. Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I love hearing all the backstories and your superhero origin stories. First of all, I feel like that should be a party icebreaker question for everyone. What is your superhero origin story?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
It gets dark sometimes, but yeah, in general, it can be really good.
We have plenty of room for questions if anybody wants to put them in the Q&A or the chat. We're happy to do that. I have questions.
Okay.
I want to know a little bit about Erika, your extraordinary world building prowess. I feel like I mean, talk about escapism into another realm. I was completely wrapped up in the incredible detail, and it felt like you must have known all of those things when you sat down to start writing the first word. So talk about that a little bit. Like, what was that process like? And did you was it like a J.K. Rowling thing where you had all the books mapped out in your head and it was just a matter of watching your mental movie, or what was that process like?
No, I wouldn't even think that J.K. I mean, I know she had a lot of it mapped out, but for me, when I wrote the first book, I actually sold the series on proposal, which, just to be specific for anybody who doesn't know, that means I wrote a proposal for the series plus 2 more books, and chapters, and a few, all of which are completely gone now. But that's where it started from. So I didn't write the whole book, on my own. And then at first, so I had a framework for what I wanted to do. But when I originally started out thinking about things, I had thought that I might be able to make this some sort of a day school, almost like, and but the world got really big inside, and I was like, oh, it's just going to be another boarding school. I hope everybody's happy with that. I hope they don't care. But when I was mapping out the story is setting aside Harry Potter, it's fairly different. I mean, if I was going to connect the dots to something, I'd probably connect it more to Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series. It is about a place that's at war. It's about a world, another world that's got 2 big lands in it, the lands of summer and the lands of winter. And these 2 places have been at war for thousands of years. And that much I knew. I knew I wanted to talk about a place that's been at war for so long they can't even remember why they are at war. Why, you know what I mean? Because I think a lot of us have been going through a lot of those emotions. And so when I was starting to build the school itself, it was one piece of the puzzle. And I knew I really wanted to do a school that was very geared towards that military aspect of things that would be useful in covert ops. So that was a big part of the world building of the school, because as a pulling on Irish mythology and her legend, she had a lot of that stuff already in there. The Bridge of Leaping and some of the things that you'll find in the book they're all right out of Irish mythology. And I say Irish, there's a lot of Celtic mythology in there, but when you use the word Celtic mythology, it really includes a lot of things that spread all the way across Europe. Whereas Irish mythology, which is sort of a part of Celtic mythology, it's like a bigger banner. These are specific things to Ireland and Irish mythology. So from that perspective, I wanted to make sure that everything stayed around that zone of military and fighting and what would this, I mean, because how cool would it be to go to a school where you get to learn martial arts and combat, and another kid gets to beat you up, and they're encouraged to beat you up, and you're encouraged to beat them up just back, forget about bullies, I'm gonna bully you right back, and with restraint, of course, but it was sort of all those, like, those things that you always wished for. I always wanted to go to a school like that. And who wouldn't want to be able to turn into any kind of a cat or raven, or, have elemental powers, or whatever it is that you end up having when you get to the school, most of whom don't have them when they get there. So,
yeah, it's, I was just going to say, I had a lot of those, ooh, this would be fun moments when I was reading through the school, even though she's getting attacked all the time. It's still the elements of, the elements of Irish mythology too. Like, did you know that you were going to pull on that so much and sort of use it as a basis for a lot of the key elements in your storytelling? Were you interested in it long before this series? Did you know how much?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, I lived in London for part of school, part of university, and it sort of started there. I would do a lot of traveling, all the way all over Ireland, only recently more up into Scotland, and through graveyards and stone circles and anything really, any old ruin I could find. It was like, I just love anything that was haunted and creepy, and that's where I first started learning about the different mythologies, because Welsh has their own, and I mean, really everywhere you go, the Irish mythology and their stories of their gods and goddesses, it's a matriarchal society. Danu, there was a female goddess lead, as opposed to Greek mythology, and they were about the same time periods, which is very endemic of the kinds of people, the society as well. And so for me, I spent probably 10 years first working on Game of Shadows, which was also set in a version of Celtic mythology, and then just, yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to set this in around her in the school, and so I wanted to pull everything I could from that specific. I mean, I make it totally, I mean, it's very fictionalized, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
I mean, I'm probably even one step way beyond what McGriordan did, with Greek mythology back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, when we first started out, I mean, I do tend to take a lot of creative license on purpose, and some of the creatures in there, which are much more European. There's some European Celtic types of creatures that come in and out of the story. And, I like to marry things up, like, vampire trolls, whatever it is, something that you can take two things and merge them together that it never should have been together, but are both still a part of the mythology that was there at the time.
Yeah. Well, it adds a little twist, a little bit of fun everywhere you look, so that was fun. And you have, for your deep dive readers, there are some glossary items in the back of the book, which are super helpful also and fun to read. Shawn, I wanted to ask you about your superhero characters in the book, which there are many, and they are equally fun. Did you know who those would be? Were you inspired mid-writing? How did those come to be?
So early on, when I developed this idea, that the whole idea for the book kind of was two ideas smashing together a little bit. One about wanting to see, it really was about like wanting to have a neurodivergent, like somebody on the autism spectrum that got to be the hero in the center of a superhero story, or an adventure. And then I also wanted to write a superhero story, and it was shortly after The Incredibles, and the idea of a superhero family was very forward, and somehow they smashed together where I said to myself, if you had a kid who'd been made to feel different their whole life, what kind of family would they have to find where they suddenly were the most normal person in the family, the one that had like was the most, you know, understanding that there's no such thing as normal. And this idea that if this kid who had been, you know, othered and devalued their whole life all of a sudden was a part of a family where their foster parents were like secretly superheroes, you would suddenly have this opportunity where they would be like, oh my gosh, I'm the only human in the house, let alone, you know. So that's a long way to get around that. Once I had that idea in my mind, I'm a believer that, you know, if you're going to put superheroes in a story, they need to serve more than one purpose, right? Like their superpowers can't just be the coolest possible superpowers. They also have to say something about who they are. So Margie is by the way, Margie and Gil are my parents' names. So I named my superhero parents after my parents because no matter how old you are, you want the brownie points, right? Right? Like, and when I go down to Florida and see my folks, they say, our kids, my son wrote this book about these two superhero parents. And I'm like, the name's Logan Foster it's about Logan. And they say, no, this is a story about these amazing parents. No, so anyway, but Margie is, you know, she's a protector and she is a warrior and she is fiercely going. The reason she wants to be a mother is because she believes she can protect someone and make sure that they're safe and get the chance they deserve. So for her to have metal hidden under her skin is not just a cool thing. I mean, like Colossus has that, and you know, like other, you know, they're cool, but it's also like that is a symbol of who she is. The fact that she has telepathy and can speak to you without speaking, and that when she speaks firmly that way, it actually can mind control you. Well, I mean, that is what a mom does. I mean, she looks at you and you go, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this, right? Like, so, and Gil is scattered, but he's fast. He's quite literally a bunch of, you know, molecules held together by will and dad jokes. And so his brain is fast. So he can make these jokes, right? These dad jokes, but he's also physically fast, but he has a hard time keeping it together. So he stutters and he has to focus to be effective. And he's got those insecurities. And so like, that's an important part of who he is too. Even the choice of, you know, the one of the villains, the, you know, Seismixer, who creates these earthquakes. He arrives, I mean, obviously an earthquake creating villain in Los Angeles is, you know, really credible in a world where superheroes and supervillains are being covered up, you know, like, okay, that works. But
yeah,
he also meets Logan at a time where Logan's entire world is, the ground is moving under his feet. And so I wanted to physicalize those things. And I think that's important. I think that because you don't want a one-dimensional or two-dimensional superhero or character ever in your books. So the things that they do are, and the traits you bring forward, they have to serve the story. I mean, you want them to be cool too, because, you know, it's fun to read about Gil, you know, turning into a beam of light and then catching Logan and then throwing him ahead, you know, at 80 miles an hour. That's cool. But like, you also want it to be a little bit of like, wow, this is a scattered guy. Being his foster kid means you're going to get a little whiplash. You know, like that's true.
You know, what was so fun too with both of your books is what that does. So the multidimensional nature of like the whole person that you're developing. Both of your books, out the gate, action. Like you can't, you don't even have a choice. You don't see it coming. It's like just instant action, right? Like a feature film action.
We both worked in Hollywood. That's why.
Yeah. Well, it shows because it's like, you know, it just takes you over. But at the same time, because there's so much action all the way through both of your books, the heart in your characters is developed almost without you noticing. And so when you have those moments, and there are moments in both of your stories that you feel the characters, the main characters, you feel it. And it takes you over just as much as that action, because you've built those characters in that multidimensional way. And it works so well.
Well, I here, so we don't talk too much about ourselves. I totally agree with you. In Erika's book, there were moments where Kelsey is learning to have friends that you just put the book down and you're just like, oh, this aches. This aches because
this is what I did.
Yeah, right. Because you want it for her before she can admit she wants it. And I think that's what a great book does. Like you want something for the character before they even know they really want it. And I would agree with you. There are parts in Kelsey that I just sat there and I'm like, that's unfair. Have her get attacked so I can just be comfortable with her finding her powers, because this is making me feel weird about the fact that I'm getting teary about her children's book as a way too old man. So,
well, I have to admit, when I was reading Logan and we were in the scene where he's deciding he wants to go back to the foster home or not, or the orphanage.
Yeah.
I guess I had it. My mind was a foster home. Yeah, I was so upset. I was like, oh no, he's gonna leave. It's gonna be awful.
Yeah.
Too many spoilers. You did the same thing to me. Yeah. Well, thank you.
I wanted to ask, so Erika, you have many books, books. Yeah. But this one is your middle grade debut, correct?
Yes.
So talk about that process. Was it different? Did it feel different writing for a middle grade audience?
It was different. I think that my voice, and I had the same editor. So Tor did Game of Shadows, and then I did The Color of Dragons with a different publisher, and then this is Starscape, which is a part of Tortine and a part of Tor. And originally I had the same editor. She's since actually become an author herself and isn't my editor anymore, but I have another really good editor. They're all awesome at Tor. But she said to me, after we were working on Game of Shadows, she's like, you really have a middle grade voice. And I would agree with that. For me, this felt like coming home. This is sort of what I've always wanted to do. I loved writing YA. The Color of Dragons was so fun, and working with Ari Salvatore was amazing. And I would say that was a young YA anyway, in terms of the, and so the differences to me are that in YA you're looking at a totally different kind of time period. All of it is that coming of age story. It all both of them are. And with YA, you're exploring a time period that feels more 16 to 20 these days. It feels much more mature. You're not looking at the world to see how you're improving everything. Initially, you're just talking about, it's you and the jeopardy's on you, and how are you going to live up to expectations, and whether it's your parents' expectations or your university's expectations, whatever it is that you're exploring, even in the fantasy world, it's are you going to live up to who the world needs you to be? At least that's what I feel like a lot of YA tends to focus on, because that's typical of that period of time. And with middle grade, it to me, it's more about focusing on the day-to-day moment, the just getting through to the next day, and just keeping that friend, and the little things. And yes, puberty's hitting and all these crushes are happening and all these little things, but it's everything feels really big, even though it's probably not the end of the world. You know what I mean? There's, it's like we used to always laugh, like this one is dating that one, and where are they going? They're not going anywhere. They're just dating, you're just exploring, you're just talking about, and then 2 days later, they're dating someone else. That's the way elementary, middle school, sort of those time periods play out. And when I write for middle grade, I really want the kids to feel very authentic and feel very of that age. And, a lot of kids like to read up, especially if they're 8 or 9, they're reading about 12, 13, 14. And to me, they have to, I feel like they should be really authentic. So I try really hard to make them feel, like they're authentically 6th and 7th grade, like in this story, and in those ages. And really, trying to put the needs of everyone first. And yes, then of course you have to save the world, you know what I mean? But how are those little things like, why is he looking at me so funny? You know what I mean? Like, those are the things that matter to you the most when you're in middle school or in elementary school. And, high school, it's like who cares what he's looking at? I've got much bigger problems to get over. So that's the differences to me, yeah.
I wanted to ask too, I would neglect my duties as a Massachusetts independent book person if I did not ask about your connections to Boston, both of you. This Boston plays a role in each of these books. So please discuss. Erika, you don't even live in Boston. But
no, but I used to spend a lot, and we still do. My grandparents lived in Worcester, and so every summer I would spend the whole summer in Worcester. And I should say part of the summer we would spend part of the time. We'd go down to Boston. We'd go to Martha's Vineyard. We would go to all the different places. And so I spent a lot of time up there. And now my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, on my husband's side, lived in Boston, and now they moved just outside of it. And so we just spend so much time there. And I just love the city so much. So when I was starting to set this, and we were talking about Irish mythology and setting, I was like, has to be Boston. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Because I think Boston has more Irish pubs than any other city in the United States. Everybody from Ireland moves to Boston when they came here. So
I love that you're saying this 2 days before St. Patty's Day. So yeah.
There you go. Woo-hoo. I actually had to correct someone today about that. It's not somebody was going, it's St. Patty's Day. And I was like, no, it's St. Paddy's Day. Like, it's a D, not a T, It was very funny. Yeah, it is. It's almost St. Patty's Day. Yay.
Well, and I do live in the Boston area now. So like I'm somebody that has only lived on 2 coasts and nowhere in between, right? So I was born in Boston, and then I moved to Los Angeles and grew up on the west side, which is where the book is set. And then I came back for college. I went to college in Waltham, and then moved back for 10 years, and then now live in Metro West Massachusetts, and have for the last almost 20 years. And Logan's name is because he was found in the airport in LAX in a jetway that was of a plane that had just left for Boston. And when the people found him and they had no name, and he had, in that shirt I told you about earlier, it said L. Foster, they were like, well, we got to name him something. And they went with Logan because that's where the plane was going. And he makes the joke that it's better than it could have been. It could have been LAX Foster. They could have named him Lax Foster, which sounds pretty bro-y.
It's been horrible.
Yeah. But yeah, and without spoiling anything, I can say that in book 2, Boston has a bigger role.
Ah, yay.
Excellent. Okay, I have 2 more questions for you. I want to squeeze them in before our time is up. One is a very important question, Erika. Your main character, Kelsey, has a magical necklace, which enables the portal to open. And so she can go from place to place. So if you had a magical necklace, where would the portal take you?
Well, hopefully it would take me to the other world where Kelsey is. I mean, I'm assuming I would only really be able to use that to go where it will let me go. So if I didn't have Kelsey's, if I had one that went anywhere in any realm, anywhere kind of a thing.
Yes.
Ooh, that would be really hard. as it is right now, I probably would still want to go to Summer City in the lands of summer, because it's a really cool place. It's actually in book 2, where I'm working on that now. And so I've been having a lot of fun with that. But if I could go any place in our world, oh, I don't know. I've always wanted to go to Kyoto, Japan. So I'd probably ask to magically portal through the trees.
Good
Kyoto.
answer. Okay. Shawn, what about you?
A magical necklace. I mean, what color is it? I want to know if it matches. No,
I mean, orange.
So yeah, where would I want to go? I think the beaches of Thailand. Every time I've ever seen those amazing beaches where the water is blue and it looks like it might only be 2 feet deep, but it also might be 20 feet deep. It's just that clear. And there are these massive like rock islands that are standing straight up out of the bay and all those things and plus I really adore Thai food. I adore all Asian food, but like I think that the idea of being on some of those beaches, and yeah, that would be, I put that necklace on me right now, actually, because Erika, you know, you're there, but like it snowed here last week again.
Yeah.
And we all know, like the joke here is just we're all sitting there going like, so it's going to be 70 this week, so we'll probably get a snowstorm on April 1st, right? Like, you know, yeah. So go ahead and send me to Thailand where it never ever.
Yeah.
That's
true. Okay, we need to know when books 2 and 2 are coming out. Please tell us soon. Although Erika, you said you're working on revisions,
yeah, my assumption was that they're going to be coming out one a year. But I'm just desperately trying to get this one done so I don't make them late, just on the revisions, but yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed.
I will be slightly more definitive. I also have been editing, and I'm very close to it, going into copy editing, which is basically for, I think probably everybody on this call knows that that's where your book doesn't change anymore, but you learn how stupid you are.
Yeah. How many typos are in it?
Right, like, oh my God, I made all these typos, and oh yeah, that's not how you use a semicolon at all. And in superhero books, you also find out, oh darn it, this character I thought I made up is a little too similar to somebody that was in 2 comic books in 1968, and now I have to change their name. But yeah, not the fun. But my book is coming out. Book 2 is January 3rd. So literally assuming it doesn't get pushed like it did this year by a couple of weeks, it will be the first release of the year in 2023.
Nice.
And I've seen cover art. I've seen color art, cover art.
Wow.
So like it is. And just like book 1, I just found out today we are doing internal illustrations by the same Peter Antonsen, who did my cover and did all the illustrations in book 1. So awesome. Yeah, once I'm done with my revisions, I get to go through the book and figure out what 8 to 10 scenes from the book 2 would be interesting to draw.
That's so fun. Exciting. And how fun to have that to look forward to the turn of the year too. I strongly recommend, if you haven't already picked up copies of these awesome books, they are available at the Silver Unicorn Bookstore, silverunicornbooks.com. I put the links in the chat. What's better than having your own superhero, strong, magical books is having signed copies of them. So we have book plates and signed versions at the store. So I want to say a huge thank you. This was such a treat to talk to you both and to read your books. How fun is my job?
Pretty good.
I mean, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. We're very appreciative, and appreciative to everybody who came tonight. Thank you for supporting independent bookstores and authors and illustrators. We really appreciate having you here. Thank you, Erica.
Casey.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Have
Bye,
a good
everybody.
night. Bye.
Bye, guys.